18th सेंचुरी और अभी तक चल रही है।
ज्यादा नहीं चलेगी।
कुछ कहा?
प्रोमिनेंस नहीं।
प्रोमिनेंस।
वाओ, ओरिजिनल।
या स्पेन से लाए थे।
वहीं छोड़ा थे। प्रोमिनेंस नहीं है ना।
प्रोमिनेंस?
मैं कहना चाह रहा था कि प्रोमिनेंस नहीं है।
प्रोमिनेंस मतलब
प्रोमिनेंस विंडोज, इसमें है हाईएस्ट वेदर रेजिस्टेंस और घर को रखे सेफ फ्रॉम टर्माइट, सीपेज, डस्ट एंड नॉइज। प्रोमिनेंस फॉर द वर्ल्ड यू डिजर्व।
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9, English news as it should be.
Very good morning. You're watching News 9. I'm Karthik Malhotra. On the show this morning, we flipped the debate on Nepal lifting the ban on social media platforms. And the big question we ask is, with the lifting of the ban, do social media platforms now operate with impunity? That's the big debate. We will bring you a perspective on the show this morning. Also on the show, Peter Navarro, the White House advisor to Donald Trump, has increased his ante, upped it once again against India, now saying this won't end well for India. We'll understand what he said on the show this morning. Also on the show, a spate of good news, but the Indian markets are unable to move the needle in the positive direction. We try and understand why are Sensex and Nifty stuck in second gear. This and more, you're watching Morning Brief at 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. First up, let's bring you all the headlines that we're tracking for you. Nepal lifts social media ban after violent youth-led protests in Kathmandu killed 19, injure over 300 with clashes near parliament. Curfew in key areas. External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar, while addressing the BRICS virtual summit, warns that trade barriers and politicization of economic policy risk hurting global growth and calls for cooperative approaches to sustainable trade. Chinese President Xi Jinping urges BRICS nations to unite against US-led trade wars, warns against protectionism and unilateralism, and calls for stronger representation of the global south. China's envoy in New Delhi slams US decision to impose 50% tariff on Indian goods as unfair and unreasonable, invites Indian firms to invest in China. White House trade advisor Peter Navarro warns India to come around on trade talks, or what he says it won't end well. Calls India the Maharajah of tariffs while accusing New Delhi of profiteering from Russian oil purchases. India's chief economic advisor V. Anant Nageswaran warns Trump's 50% tariffs could shave off 0.5 to 0.6% of India's GDP this year, says prolonged uncertainty poses major risk. India and Israel signed bilateral investment agreement to promote and protect mutual investments and pave the way for increased bilateral investments from the current $800 million. Gold and silver prices hit record highs in India's futures market, with October gold rising to 1,08,180 rupees per 10 grams, driven by weak US labor data, rising expectations of Federal Reserve rate cuts, a weaker dollar, as well as safe haven demand. VinFast Auto India signs MOU with Axis Bank to provide up to 200 crore rupees in dealer financing and attractive retail credit options for customers as the EV maker gears up to launch the VF6 and VF7 models. The Gen Z revolution in Nepal took an unprecedented turn yesterday before the government finally decided to lift the ban. That's a big story that we're tracking for you this morning. Nepal's Oli government has lifted its controversial ban on several social media platforms after violent protests erupted in Kathmandu yesterday, led largely by Gen Z youth or those under 26 years of age. Now, at least 19 people were killed and over 300 injured in the protests. Protesters clashed with police near the parliament, where some broke through the security barricades as well as vandalized gates. A curfew remains in place across key areas, including the legislature, the president's residence and the prime minister's office. The protests that began over social media ban grew into a larger movement against deep-rooted corruption in the country. TikTok, the Chinese ByteDance-owned social media platform, continued to be accessible, but saw several viral videos of children and the politicians flaunting wealth, which added fuel to the fire. Meanwhile, Meta's platforms like Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, as well as YouTube, the Google-owned media platform, unregistered under Nepal's new rules, for shutdown before resuming online later at night. The United Nations and Amnesty International have both called for a swift, transparent probe into alleged excessive use of force. The UN warned of deeply worrying reports of live ammunition being used. India has not commented yet, but security had been tightened in border districts while Nepal deployed its army in several unrest-hit regions. While there's no denying that the use of force against the protesting youth, many in school and college uniforms, cannot be justified, there still are tough questions that social media firms must answer to, especially in light of not complying with the law of the land and doing little to curb the menace of misinformation. And that's the angle that we want to take this morning on the Morning Brief at 9. So let's try and address these big questions that we have. First up, should governments even insist on big tech compliance with regulation, or should platforms be allowed to ignore the law under the free speech principle? Next up, why did Meta, that owns Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp, as well as Google, that runs YouTube, not register in Nepal? Should there have been at least one nodal officer and one employee and one office, like many other countries that these platforms operate in? Why was Nepal ignored and its regulations not adhered to? Next up, how big really is the menace of fake news, misinformation as well as hate speech? Are there lessons to be learned from the backlash on X for anti-Semitism comments, or the fact that Meta abolished its fact-checking team soon after Donald Trump became US president in his second term earlier this year? We also ask, did the social media ban become just a trigger for allegedly disgruntled youth in Nepal over issues of unemployment as well as government corruption? And finally, now that the ban is lifted, does it allow social media platforms to operate with impunity, even if issues of misinformation, hate speech, and, as the Nepalese government claims, money laundering could be real? Nikhil Pawar, the founder of Media Nama, is here to break this down for us. Nikhil, good morning. Pleasure to have you here on News 9. Help us understand, is there a case for big tech to ignore regulation anywhere in the world?
Karthik, I don't think there's any case for big tech to ignore regulation anywhere in the world. But regulation also has to be reasonable, right? There were just 7 days given for compliance after a Supreme Court directive to social media platforms to establish a local presence in the country. Now, if you go back to the IT rules in 2021 in India, the government actually gave 3 months for compliance. And even then, some companies struggled to get a grievance redressal officer in place because that person would have criminal liability. And no one wanted to take criminal liability. So different platforms have different challenges in hiring, in finding resources. 7 days is too short, a time frame for someone to have a local officer, to have to go through a registration process even. And look, all of this also links to the impending social media bill in Nepal,
right?
Which is full of problems. It enforces pre-censorship of content by platforms. It holds platforms liable for the content that users may post on it. It has real ID verification requirements which undermine anonymity online, which is a critical part of free speech.
All right.
So, I think platforms should have at least registered with the government. Registration doesn't take time, but also look at the scale of the platforms. Like Signal is a social media platform according to the government of Nepal.
Right.
The Signal is a messaging app, so is WhatsApp.
Correct.
Signal has a skeleton team of like maybe 10, 12 people operating, They probably didn't even know about the fact that this law exists.
Right.
So I think there has to be reasonableness on both sides, especially when such a directive is given. It's most companies do not track Nepal specifically, and that has an impact. Some government somewhere might, or a court might issue a directive, but that has to also be sent to the companies in question.
Sure. I understand, Nikhil, but I want to understand, and for the sake of our viewers, if you can simplify, what are the rights of intermediaries, which are these platforms, versus the criminal liability on them versus those who are posting on them? What is the role that intermediaries across the world play in ensuring that at least there is some reasonable amount of fact checking done? There is at least some taking down of viral content which is misinformation. Is there enough being done by social media platforms anywhere in the world?
So look, there is no doubt that social media platforms have rolled back fact-checking mechanisms because fact-checking itself was political, right?
Exactly.
The Republicans in the US argued that all the fact-checking that was happening was against them. So governments want their point of view to be presented. Even in India, the government tried to create a fact-checking unit which was struck down by the Bombay High Court. So governments want their narrative to reign supreme. Often political parties that are in power don't want criticism online. And then platforms are supposed to fact check everyone. And who knows what exactly the truth is. So platforms have actually rolled back on these because it's a huge expense for them. They can't be expected to be the arbiters of truth because that's exactly what we worry about, right? If they censor something, don't censor something else, are they trying to influence the narrative in the country? So it's a no-win situation for the platforms. Now, the intermediary provision online, what it does is that it allows platforms to enable us, you and me, to post content online without the platform being liable for it. If the platform is liable for every random thing that every random person puts on social media, it will not survive. So the question is, do you want these platforms to even exist? And there is 90% legitimate usage of the platform. 10% might be incorrect, harmful, illegal.
Right.
Do you want to compromise the 90% by holding the platform liable for defamation, copyright, abuse? I think that will do more harm than good, right? Because even look at Nepal. For Nepal, messaging, social media is a means of being in touch with family because
Exactly.
so much of the population lives outside the country.
Exactly.
That gets shut down and people will obviously be upset.
So do you think the manner in which this regulation was first enforced and the manner in which the takedown was done, are there lessons to be learned there that A, give more time, like you mentioned, 7 days is not enough, and B, perhaps look at one platform, two platforms at a time rather than doing a surgical strike across the entire gamut of what they call social media? Because like you mentioned, Signal, WhatsApp, these are communication tools and these are tools for expats to be in touch with their families back home. Should the government have been a little more mindful before a blanket ban being imposed, which eventually led to 19 youth actually dying in the line of these protests?
So I think firstly it's a misnomer that Signal and WhatsApp are social media platforms. They are messaging platforms, and social media is a very different construct where what you post is public. What you post is
just for the sake of clarity, right? Nikhil, are these not platforms as well where original content is getting created and getting disseminated and people have the ability to like it, share it, forward it to other people? So is that not in the same overall architecture of social media? Because at the end of the day, these are social conversations happening, albeit in a one-to-one or one-to-many if you're part of a group, as opposed to a one-to-public, arguably, when you're on a traditional social media platform.
So it is one-to-one, and even the one-to-many, that those messages that go out, technically they're one-to-one. So in a group, if there are 50 people, a message goes out to each of those 50 people. So they are private messaging platforms and not dissemination to the public. Now for that, perhaps for each country, it needs to define what is dissemination to the public. Just because something can be forwarded from one person to the other doesn't make it a public activity, because they're not sending it to millions for anyone to randomly discover it. It is push and pull both, whereas in case of social media, it is just published online for someone who's browsing the web or browsing a platform can certainly chance upon it, right? Someone you don't know. So private and public these are very, very important constructs. These are very important questions that you're asking. We cannot mess with this because it will break the way messaging works. So I think we need to separate messaging from social media, and this confusion that gets created that messaging platforms are social media platforms. They are not. In case of social media, also what the challenge lies over here is that, I think India did it right at that point in time where they gave a three-month deadline to the platforms to comply. And we found that even that wasn't enough. You look at the GDPR in the EU, they gave 2 years for companies to comply. So the complexity of the requirement and the scale of the deployment that these platforms will be required to have should be taken into consideration. You can't just blanket issue something saying 7 days comply or else, right? And that's why the rollback makes sense, because it's unreasonable.
All right, the rollback makes sense because it was unreasonable. Well, 15 days is what the government has given itself in Nepal. Let's see what regulations or changes in the regulation emerge after 15 days. Nikhil Pawar, founder Media Nama, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
And moving on now, White House trade advisor Peter Navarro has once again launched a sharp attack on India, warning that New Delhi must come around on trade talks with the US or it won't end well. Now, speaking on the Real America's Voice show, Navarro called India the Maharajah of tariffs, claiming it has the highest duties of any major country against the US. He accused India of profiteering from cheap Russian oil since the Ukraine war, saying American taxpayers are paying the price. Navarro compared India with US allies like the European Union, Japan and South Korea, saying they've agreed to fairer deals and closer cooperation. He warned that siding with Russia and China could isolate India. Navarro also lashed out at Elon Musk's platform X, accusing Indian users of manipulating his poll and calling Musk's community notes propaganda. In a now viral post, he used strong language and called India's purchase of Russian oil blood money, claiming it funds Russia's war machine. Meanwhile, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, speaking at the BRICS virtual summit, warned that trade restrictions and politicizing economic policies would hurt global growth rather than help it. He said the world needs constructive and cooperative approaches to make trade more sustainable instead of adding barriers or linking trade to unrelated issues. He further stressed that BRICS nations, despite their diversity, face common disruptions and must work to stabilize the world economy and order. Let's listen in.
Highness, Excellencies, trade patterns and market access are today prominent issues in the global economic discourse. The world requires constructive and cooperative approaches to promote trade that is sustainable. Increasing barriers and complicating transactions will not help. Neither would the linking of trade measures to non-trade matters. The BRICS itself can set an example by reviewing trade flows among its member states. Where India is concerned, some of our biggest deficits are with BRICS partners, and we've been pressing for expeditious solutions. We hope that this realization will be part of the takeaways from today's meeting.
External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar there. Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping, addressing the BRICS leaders meeting via video link, called for a united response by BRICS nations to trade challenges posed by the United States. Xi Jinping said Washington's tariff wars had severely disrupted the world economy and undermined global trade rules. Now, without naming the US directly, he warned against hegemonianism, unilateralism and protectionism, urging BRICS to stand at the forefront of the global south to defend multilateralism, reform global governance systems and strengthen cooperations. Xi Jinping also promoted his global governance initiative, calling for a more just and equitable world order, greater democracy in international relations, and deeper economic, financial, and technological collaboration to ensure BRICS remains resilient against global challenges. Adding to the criticism against Trump's tariffs, China's ambassador to India, Xu Finghong, has slammed the United States' decision to impose a 50% tariff on Indian goods, calling it unfair and unreasonable. Now, speaking in New Delhi, Xu urged closer India-China economic cooperation and also invited Indian businesses to invest and expand their presence in China. He rejected protectionism and tariff wars, saying countries should work together for inclusive and beneficial globalization. Now, targeting Washington, Xu accused the US of weaponizing tariffs despite long enjoying the benefits of free trade. Listen in.
The United States has long benefited from free trade. But now it is using tariffs as a weapon to demand exorbitant prices. The 50% tariff on India is unfair, unreasonable, and China firmly opposes it. As the two most significant emerging economies, China and India should prioritize development and foster mutual support and success. This is what President Xi told PM Modi. PM Modi said that India-China cooperation will make the 21st century a genuine Asian century.
And let's slip into a very short break, but coming up on the other side, Mohit Gang is here to decode why the needle on the Sensex and Nifty 50 is not moving. It seems to be another flat day this morning for the benchmark indices. We'll bring you that and more on the other side. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
एसोसिएट स्पॉन्सर एंकर टूथपेस्ट, नए जमाने की नई सुरक्षा।
ट्रस्टेड लॉयर शर्मा जी ने अपने दीवारों पर जेके मैक्स पेंट्स क्या लगवाया? अजीब अजीब बहाने लेकर आने लगे पड़ोसी उनका घर देखने।
हाय शर्मा जी, एक रील बना लूं उस ब्यूटीफुल सी वॉल के पास।
मैं देखती हूँ।
हमारा टॉमी नहीं मिल रहा, यहाँ आया होगा।
यहाँ टॉमी? मुझे गर्मा गर्म पकौड़े आपके लिए।
जेके मैक्स पेंट्स, खुशियों के रंग।
This is nothing. My Skoda is 5 stars. तेरे को पता है मेरी Skoda ना ऑटोमेटिक है और वो भी 7 speed. My Skoda can fly to Jupiter like a rocket.
Skoda.
बेस्ट है सर।
पर नया क्यों?
आर्किटेक्ट जी, something special for you. बिरला ओपस अश्योरेंस देने के लिए।
ऐसा क्या है इसमें?
इसमें है एडवांस क्वालिटी। 1 साल में पेंट को कुछ भी हुआ तो पेंटिंग वापस करके देंगे।
वापस करके देंगे।
वो भी फ्री। क्वालिटी पे इतना कॉन्फिडेंस, इसीलिए बिरला ओपस अश्योरेंस। रजिस्टर करो birlaopus.com पर।
That goat is long dead, but Cyrus Bhai are still alive. Game Cho. This is God's office calling. You're not a VIP, so God won't speak directly, but here's the deal. You have been granted a second chance with a brand new news show.
Thank you very much. Just one thing. You said 2 lives, 2 more lives. So I'll first be a newsman who wins awards, and second I'll be
Cockroach.
better make this show last. No hurry to, be a cockroach. Let's stay here for a little while. Don't want to be a cockroach. Apparently, they have lots of issues, like being stamped upon. Which is the same thing as a newsman. I mean, they're not that different.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. Let's bring you all the action from Dalal Street. Markets have opened just a few minutes ago, and it seems to be a good day for markets, at least in the first few minutes of trading. It's a gap up opening with Sensex as well as Nifty 50 both inching higher. Look at Nifty 50, it's up almost 0.4%, inching towards the 25,000 mark. Meanwhile, Sensex is comfortably above the 81,000 levels, a good 100 plus points over its close yesterday. In fact, a lot more than that. In fact, yesterday it was barely able to even come in the vicinity of 81,000. So it seems like a good day for markets. You're wondering, after a spate of good news from India's GDP and the data coming from Q1 as well as the GST reforms, why are the markets still in some sort of a slow lane? But that seems to have turned at least in favor of investors early morning today. Let's look at the Nifty 50 heat map. And the surprise really this morning comes from the IT sector, because the IT sector is really driving the rally. Infosys is up about 3.3%. Wipro is up about 2.5% or so. And meanwhile, there seems to be some consolidation, at least in the auto space, which did rally the last few trading sessions after the GST reforms were announced by the government. Meanwhile, a flattish mixed sort of undertone in other sectors. The consumer non-durables, the FMCG pack, barring Nestle, seems to be a little in the negative this morning. Reliance is absolutely flat, the heavyweight, and the mixed signals on the banking and finance side are also unable to establish a trend line really. So let's understand first up what's happening in the IT space. Is it to do with the possibility of the US Federal Reserve finally looking at cutting rates in its meeting next week? Or is it the fact that IT per se is taking the knock-on effect from the Nasdaq, which closed at record highs yesterday? We've got Mohit Gang here to explain and unwrap all that for us. Mohit, good morning. Pleasure having you back here with us on Newsline. Help us understand, why are IT stocks rallying so beautifully this morning?
Hi Karthik, good morning. Always a pleasure to be on your show. Look, I think, yes, it's a combination of multiple factors, and a couple of those factors I think you have very beautifully highlighted. One is obviously the strong possibility of rate cut on September 17th, which is the next FOMC. And I think the market is completely now pricing in a 25 bips rate cut. So I think that's pretty much on the cards now. And the 10-year yields in US, if you see, have softened to almost like a 4% kind of level, 4.04 if I'm not wrong.
Right.
Right. So I think that always augurs very well for the IT indices or the IT benchmarks. Obviously, there has been a tearing rally in Nasdaq, and I think the amount of investments which these IT companies have been pumping into the AI has been unfounded, and I think the numbers are staggering. So I think all of that is fueling rally, but domestically, I think it's also the sentiment which has been driven by the buyback announcement or the buyback proposal which Infosys is kind of coming out with on September 11th, if I'm not wrong. Infosys, if all of us know, is sitting on a huge pile of cash and cash equivalents, almost to the tune of almost 45,000 odd crores. So a buyback proposal will mean roughly 25 to 30 odd % mop up from the market, which would be around, again, in the vicinity of somewhere in the 13 to 15,000 odd crore mark. And that kind of gives a very positive signal to the overall sector. Infosys being the bellwether stock, I think it's just gotten lapped up by the street as a very positive news. And it also shows the amount of confidence which the management puts behind the company. So I think overall, all these triggers are kind of helping the IT sector to show us a good green mark today morning.
All right. So a lot of factors, of course, the rally driven by the bellwether Infosys. Mohit, I also want to shift focus now, or rather shift gears, if I can do some wordplay, to the auto sector. And the auto sector has seen unprecedented great days the last 2 or 3 trading sessions ever since the GST reforms were announced. But there seems to be some consolidation, some booking of profits that's visible, at least on the charts this morning. How does this story look for you? Coming festive season followed by the New Year discounts for, let's say, the next quarter or so, how does India's auto sector look to you?
Oh, I think the wins for the auto sector are mind-blowing, Karthik. Honestly, I think the GST booster has been amazing. Anything which is 1200cc and below, and obviously for two-wheelers, I think that's a great bonanza. And given that the festive season just kicks off from 23rd of September, I think the signals are very, very good and looks very promising for the overall sector. Also, I think the consolidation is just about a little bit of profit taking. There has been a good tearing rally in the auto names, and I think market is just about consolidating its position before it makes way for the next move. So I'm pretty bullish on this entire pack, Karthik.
All right, and if we move away from sectoral focus, Mohit, and spend some time on the broad benchmark indices, we are almost a year to when the Sensex and the Nifty saw their lifetime highs on 26th or 27th of September last year. Investors waiting in the wings, hoping for recouping some of those losses that we've seen through the year. But despite a spate of good news, Mohit, and I started the segment by saying that we had excellent Q1 GDP growth numbers, we have the GST reforms, and some sort of a certainty around the uncertain Trump tariffs. Now, at least, the deadline has passed, the tariffs are in place, so there's more certainty, perhaps not positive certainty, but at least there's some surety of which way that is headed. And many believe it can only get better from here. But for some reason, the benchmark Sensex and Nifty continue to be in that slow momentum, not really inching up as fast as investors would want them to. So what should investors who have patiently been waiting now do? What should their strategy be?
Look, Karthik, I have long believed that markets can keep testing your patience for a pretty long while, right? And all of us cumulatively can go crazy trying to figure out what's the real reason why the markets are not rallying in spite of such positive news flow domestically. Having said which, I think we cannot forget the environment in which we live. I think globally, geopolitically, it's not very easy to survive this the trade war. Honestly, after having picked up a fight with the big boy on the class, so my sense is that will have ramifications and larger repercussions if it is not sorted quickly enough, Karthik. And I think that's what market is also sensing. Yes, you are right that market has factored in the 50% tariff news, but look, honestly, I think we haven't yet factored in the second level and the third level implications if US and India were to go head in terms of this tariff war. And if there are larger sanctions on India, which I think even US is forcing EU to contemplate for everyone who's buying or who's importing oil and gas from Russia, then perhaps it might look a little more sober from here on. So my sense is it's a wait and watch scenario. For long-term investors, obviously these are good accumulation zones, but you never know when the rally comes on. It will all be on a piece of news whenever it happens. So one single line will turn the fortunes, and we will all have to wait patiently for that line to come our way. It perhaps might happen next year or might happen sometime this financial year. No one knows. But yes, we'll have to be in the market to enjoy the benefits of that.
That's right. So you mentioned one big boy, one big bully in the class that India has picked up the fight with, but then there are also other big bullies that India is now becoming friends with, and I'm talking about Russia and China here. The fact that the coming together of the BRICS bloc, and in fact what we heard External Affairs Minister as well as the message from Xi Jinping yesterday that BRICS must consolidate and become one united front to deal with Donald Trump. How does news or how does, a messaging like that augur for foreign investors? Do they look at the formation of BRICS and the coming together and the rise of RIC as one potential way to offset the big bully called Donald Trump?
I'm not really sure on that, Karthik. Honestly, I think foreign money will typically follow the US pattern, and that's my reading of the markets. Honestly, I think that's where the larger chunk of money flows from. It's the European, the US, and the Canadian funds or the sovereign funds or their diktats, possibly. That's where the larger foreign money comes from. And I'm pretty happy, honestly, the way India postured yesterday. It was not the Prime Minister Modi who attended the BRICS meeting. It was the External Affairs Minister. So Prime Minister Modi kind of diplomatically kept away from the meeting, signaling to US that yes, we are still open to a kind of a deal or a pact with US, and US will perhaps remain our first recourse. And ideally, that should be the case. Leave aside Russia in that equation, because Russia has been a long-lasting Indian friend, and that friendship doesn't go anywhere. But I think you and I, honestly, everyone is skeptical of how far an India-China relationship can go, honestly. Right. So my sense is, I think diplomatically it was a great move for Prime Minister not to have attended the meeting. And I would still hope and believe that India and US find a pathway together.
All right. Well, let's hope that that happens sooner than later, at least in the interest of retail investors. But Mohit Gang, always a pleasure having you here with us, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And staying with the story of tariffs that Mohit was just talking about, let's continue and understand. India's chief economic advisor, V. Anant Nageswaran, has warned now that US President Donald Trump's 50% tariff on India could shave off as much as 0.5% from India's GDP this year. Now, speaking to Bloomberg TV, he said the impact could rise to 60 basis points or 0.6% if the tariffs remain in place through the entire financial year. Nageswaran called the move a major risk for India if uncertainty spills over into next year. Remember, Trump imposed the tariffs in the month of August, accusing India of funding Russia's war by buying its oil. Still, Nageswaran stuck to the government's growth forecast of 6.3% to 6.8%, citing a strong 7.8% expansion in the April to June quarter of this financial year. Plus, there was also the recent GST rate cuts and an 8-year low in inflation as key boosters for the economy. He further said these factors should help boost demand and ensure India meets its fiscal deficit target of 4.4% this year. Vietnamese automaker, the EV maker VinFast Auto India, has partnered with Axis Bank to offer financing solutions for its exclusive dealer network ahead of its highly anticipated EV launch. Now, under the agreement, Axis Bank will provide up to 200 crore rupees in dealer financing, along with retail credit options for customers, including attractive interest rates, flexible repayment plans, 100% on-road funding, and priority services across VinFast's EV lineup. Dedicated bank representatives will be available at showrooms to assist buyers, making EV ownership more accessible as well as convenient. The collaboration leverages Axis Bank's extensive branch and digital network to reach consumers in urban as well as emerging markets. This tie-up comes as VinFast prepares to launch its VF6 and VF7 models and expand its footprint in India following the inauguration of its EV factory in Thoothukudi, Tamil Nadu. And before we slip into another break, let's look at the global headlines that we're following for you this morning. Trump administration rolls out new federal immigration sweep in Chicago, vowing to target the worst of the worst criminals, follows a similar crackdown in Boston last week. Leaders of the 11-member BRICS bloc accuse Washington of fueling a damaging trade war. Brazil's Lula da Silva slams Trump's policies as tariff blackmail and illegal trade practices. South Korea confirms plans to bring back nationals detailed in a Georgia Hyundai plant raid as Trump administration vows more workplace crackdowns on foreign workers. Tesla loses ground in US EV market as rivals gain traction. Analysts say Elon Musk's right-wing politics and alignment with Trump may be hurting the brand. Volkswagen in advanced talks with Washington over major investments in the US auto market after tariffs cost Europe's top car maker billions this year. Africa's largest used car market reels under US auto tariffs, with soaring prices threatening affordability and trade flows that millions rely on. Germany and France push to target Russia's oil giant Lukoil in next round of EU sanctions, part of growing pressure campaign over Moscow's war in Ukraine. France's parliament votes 364 to 191 in no-confidence motion, ousting Prime Minister François Bayrou, plunging Emmanuel Macron into fresh political crisis amid calls to resign. Meta ramps up global AI push, offers contractors up to $55 an hour to design personality-driven chatbots in Hindi, Spanish, Portuguese, and Indonesian. take these stories on the other side of the break. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
एसोसिएट स्पॉन्सर डायना प्रीमियम ब्यूटी सोप, पहली झलक करे खूबसूरत असर।
The power of Digi-Alkaline from Nippo Thor.
ब्यूटीफुल
18th सेंचुरी और अभी तक चल रही है।
ज्यादा नहीं चली।
कुछ कहा?
प्रोमिनेंस नहीं,
प्रोमिनेंस।
वाओ, ओरिजिनल।
या स्पेन से लाए थे।
वहीं छोड़ा थे। प्रोमिनेंस नहीं है ना?
प्रोमिनेंस?
मैं कहना चाह रहा था कि प्रोमिनेंस नहीं है।
प्रोमिनेंस मतलब
प्रोमिनेंस विंडोज, इसमें है हाईएस्ट वेदर रेजिस्टेंस और घर को रखे सेफ फ्रॉम टर्माइट, सीपेज, डस्ट एंड नॉइस। प्रोमिनेंस फॉर द वर्ल्ड यू डिजर्व।
Welcome back. You're watching News 9. On to stories from around the world now. The Trump administration on Monday announced a new federal immigration enforcement push in Chicago, calling it Operation Midway Blitz. The Department of Homeland Security said the move was needed due to state and city sanctuary policies that limit cooperation with immigration agents. President Trump has repeatedly clashed with Illinois Governor J.P. Pritzker and threatened to deploy National Guard troops to the city. Officials stressed the Chicago sweep would focus on the worst of the worst criminals and follow a parallel operation launch in Boston recently. Meanwhile, leaders of the 11-member BRICS bloc blasted U.S. economic policies during a virtual summit on Monday, accusing Washington of fueling a damaging trade war. Remember, BRICS members are among those hardest hit by Trump's punitive tariffs. Brazilian President Lula da Silva denounced what he called tariff blackmail and illegal trade practices by Washington. Brazil's Lula also condemned a U.S. military build-up in a Caribbean, citing the recent operation that destroyed a suspected narco boat and left 11 people dead, raising tensions with Venezuela. Russian President Vladimir Putin also joined the virtual talks. Last week, Putin visited China and held bilateral talks with Chinese leader Xi Jinping and India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, among others. South Korea is moving to pick up Korean workers following a raid at a Hyundai motor manufacturing facility in the United States state of Georgia last week. A Korean presidential official confirmed as the Trump administration promised more raids on businesses. More details in the next story.
South Korea is moving to fly home its nationals caught up in a raid on a Hyundai plant in the US. About 475 people were arrested at a facility in Georgia on Thursday by immigration officials. That included some 300 Koreans. The raid caused deep dismay in Seoul, where only days earlier the government had pledged to deepen business cooperation with the US. On Sunday, South Korea's presidential chief of staff, Kang Hoon-sik, said negotiations to free the workers had been completed. He said a chartered plane would bring them home, with media reports saying that could happen Wednesday. Donald Trump defended the raid and denied it had hurt relations with South Korea, but also said he would look at the situation.
ICE was doing right because they were here illegally, but we do have to work something out where we bring in experts so that our people can be trained so that they can do it themselves. Does that make sense?
Trump expanded on the idea in a social media post. He told foreign firms, Your investments are welcome, and we encourage you to legally bring your very smart people with great technical talent to build world-class products. What we ask in return is that you hire and train American workers. Thursday's raid took place at a giant project to build EV batteries operated by Hyundai and LG Energy Solution. The Department of Homeland Security said many of the workers were barred from working after crossing the border illegally or overstaying their visas. Now the events in Georgia look likely to be repeated, with US Border Czar Tom Homan vowing Sunday to step up raids on workplaces. Seoul said it regretted the arrests and the sight of its citizens in shackles, but also said it would look for ways to improve its visa system.
Meanwhile, Europe's top car maker Volkswagen is in advanced talks with the US government over substantial investments in the world's second largest auto market, where tariffs have cost Volkswagen billions of euros so far this year. Here's more.
Volkswagen was in advanced talks with the US government over substantial investments in the world's second largest auto market. Chief Executive Oliver Blume told Reuters VW did not appreciate an asymmetric deal between Brussels and Washington. That deal foresees tariffs on EU auto imports of 15% and no tariffs for US industrial goods imports into Europe. Speaking to Reuters at the IAA Munich car show, where VW had unveiled its new small electric SUV, Blume said the company was counting on an investment plan in the US, adding that talks with the US government were very positive. VW is considering substantial investments to expand its US business, including a plant for its Audi brand, and has held talks about how Washington could lend support. Volkswagen is trying to soften the blow from US auto import tariffs of 27.5%, which have cost the company billions of dollars.
Up to now, it's several billion euros on our balance sheet. This situation cost this year, but it's more important to what situation we will come in the future. On the one hand side with the tariffs and maybe with a joint agreement based on our huge investments we could do in the US.
Like its rivals, VW is waiting for current US auto import tariffs to fall to 15%, something the US administration under Trump has pledged to do.
And staying with stories from the auto sector, Tesla's US market share dropped to a near 8-year low in the month of August as buyers chose electric vehicles from a growing stable of rivals over the aging lineup offered by CEO Elon Musk's company. Some analysts argue Musk's right-wing politics, work and association with President Donald Trump has hurt the Tesla brand. More in this report.
Tesla's US market share dropped to a near 8-year low in August. That's according to data from research firm Cox Automotive, shared exclusively with Reuters. It shows buyers chose electric vehicles from a growing number of rivals over Tesla's aging lineup. The decline highlights the threat from automakers ramping up EV incentives at a challenging time for the industry. Analysts expect an EV sales bump to continue through September in the US, but they see a drop coming when federal tax credits expire at the end of the month. That could raise financial pressure on Tesla and other automakers. Tesla once held more than 80% of the US EV market, but data showed it made up for 38% of the total EV sales in the US in August. That's the first time it's fallen below the 40% mark since October 2017. Tesla has turned its focus to building robo-taxis and humanoid robots, while other automakers are rolling out new EVs. Much of Tesla's trillion-dollar valuation hangs on that bet, although the core auto business is still its moneymaker for now. Cox has more complete data for July, when Tesla's market share fell to 42% from just under 49% in June. The drop was the sharpest since March 4 years ago. Some analysts argue Musk's right-wing political work and association with President Donald Trump has hurt the brand.
More stories from the auto sector from around the world. Africa's largest second-hand car market is facing mounting uncertainty as US President Donald Trump's auto tariffs push prices beyond the reach of many buyers. Dealers warn that the added costs are squeezing affordability and threatening trade flows that millions depend on. Take a look.
The license plates at this sprawling auto market in the Nigerian megacity Lagos tell you where these second-hand cars have come from. The U.S. International Trade Administration says 60% of all used cars shipped to Nigeria come from the United States. And for the Nigerians who can afford one, a used car imported from the U.S. has long been the best option. But the fallout from the Trump administration's 25% import tariffs on car and auto parts could be changing that.
We have less customers now. Nobody's buying cars.
Sunday Akibor runs what he says is the continent's largest used vehicle market. He says that, for example, a Toyota Corolla that used to sell for 7 million naira, or around $4,500, now costs more than double. The reason is Trump's car import tariff applies to car and parts imported to the U.S., some of which are then re-exported to countries such as Nigeria. That's on top of a 35% import duty and levy imposed by Nigeria on used vehicles in 2022, in a bid to encourage local assembly. U.S. vehicle exports to Nigeria had already fallen $580 million in 2024, compared with a little over $1 billion the year before, according to the Observatory of Economic Complexity platform. This year, the numbers are expected to sink a further 18%. Financial consultant Shuaibu Idris believes this could fundamentally reshape Nigeria's automotive landscape. But he also believes the disruption may be temporary.
Chances are this may just last for the period that Donald Trump will be the president of America. I don't see it last forever because over time, countries will retaliate, countries will reciprocate, the gesture of Donald Trump, and that will make, the American product also to be a little less competitive than other, products in other, countries.
French automaker Renault has unveiled the sixth generation of its popular Clio hatchback at the Munich Car Show, the model's biggest redesign in 13 years. Clio remains a top seller for the French automaker but faces mounting pressure from fast expanding Chinese rivals in Europe. Now, built in Turkey, Clio 5 was Europe's best-selling car in the first half of this calendar year 2025 with over 130,000 units sold.
As you know, our industry is going through a challenging period. We are facing technological, regulatory and geopolitical disruptions. And we are confronted with unprecedented fierce competition, particularly from China. Things are changing, and they are changing fast. We do not have the luxury of a status quo. We must constantly seek to be more efficient, more agile, and strive for excellence in execution.
France's parliament has voted to oust Prime Minister François Bayrou and his minority government in a crushing no-confidence motion. The 364 to 194 vote was triggered by the government's debt-taming plans, deepening a political crisis for President Emmanuel Macron, who is now undergoing calls to resign. For now, Macron will have to search for his fifth prime minister in less than 2 years. Take a look.
France's parliament brought down the government on Monday over its plans to tame the ballooning national debt, deepening a political crisis that is weakening the Eurozone's second-largest economy. Lawmakers voted to oust Prime Minister François Bayrou and his minority government by 364 votes to 194. Bayrou will tender his resignation on Tuesday, his office said. President Emmanuel Macron, who is facing calls to resign, will instead hunt for his fifth prime minister in less than 2 years. His office said he would appoint one in the next few days. The next government's most pressing task will be to pass a budget, the same challenge Bayrou faced when he took office 9 months ago. Securing the backing of a very divided parliament will be equally hard for his successor. Bayrou had called the confidence vote to try to win parliamentary support for his strategy to lower a deficit that stands at nearly double the European Union's 3% ceiling, and to start tackling a debt pile equivalent to 114% of GDP. But opposition parties were in little mood to rally behind his planned savings of over $50 billion in next year's budget, with an election for Macron's successor looming in 2027. Macron may eventually decide the only path out of the crisis lies in calling a snap election, but he has so far resisted calls to dissolve parliament a second time.
And that's all we have for you on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. Thank you so much for watching, but news continues right here on News 9, so stay tuned.
Light, camera, and action. Kick back, relax, grab your favorite snack because News 9 is here with your weekend dose of entertainment. It's time to take a deeper dive into the buzzworthy happenings of the entertainment world. From celebrity gossips to exclusive conversations, from nostalgic moments to News 9's pick of the week, don't worry, we've got you covered here. And I hope you've grabbed your popcorn by now because News 9's page 3 is here to serve you everything that we call entertainment.